You're 6 years old, and you've just come home from school. Your knees are burning because you fell at recess in front of everyone. The other children laughed. You felt something breaking inside your chest, a shame so great it felt like the ground was going to swallow you whole. When your mother opens the door, you run to her, your eyes already wet, your lip trembling. She looks at you and says, "Stop it. It was nothing. You're exaggerating." And in that exact second, something inside you learns a lesson that you will carry for the next 30 years. You'll learn that what you feel doesn't matter. But what you don't know at that moment is that this seemingly harmless phrase is creating an emotional architecture that will determine how you relate to the world, to people, and especially to yourself. You are learning that your emotions are a problem to be hidden, not a truth to be heard. And that exact learning will save you at that moment, and it will destroy you decades later. That's how emotional hunger is born. The hunger to be seen, to be heard, to have your emotions treated as if they were real. And when you never receive that validation, when no one ever says, "I see what you're feeling, and it's okay to feel that way," you begin to build a version of yourself that can survive in a world where your feelings have no right to exist. You start small. Agi sechi. When your father forgets to go to your soccer game and you feel that pang of disappointment, you no longer cry. You say, "It's okay, Dad was busy." At 9, when your best friend throws a party and doesn't invite you, that deep sadness that makes you want to disappear is replaced by an automatic shrug. It wasn't that important, acidosi, when you get a low grade and feel paralyzing anxiety. You've already learned to transform that into, "I'm stupid anyway, whatever." And every time you do that, every time you swallow what you feel and present an acceptable version of yourself, something happens. The people around you praise you. "Wow, you're so mature for your age. You never cause trouble. What an easy child. You're so calm. You never complain about anything." And you, who are 10, 12, 14 years old, hear these compliments and feel something strange, a mixture of pride and an emptiness so deep that you can't even name it. Because you are being praised for not having needs, for not bothering anyone, for not existing emotionally. And at 16, you've already become an expert at it. Someone asks, "How are you?" And before even checking how you really are, your mouth automatically answers, "I'm fine." You don't even feel it anymore. You simply cut off access. It's as if between what happens to you and what you express there is an automatic translator that transforms everything into "everything's all right." And it works. People love you. You are the friend who never causes problems, the son who never worries, the boyfriend who never demands too much. But there is a cost that no one sees, that you don't even see yet. Achi 23. You're in a relationship and your partner asks what you want to do on the weekend. It's a simple question, but you realize you can't answer, not because you don't know, but because you learned so long ago that your desires don't matter, that you genuinely can't access them. You say, whatever you want. And he thinks it's cute. He thinks you're easygoing, easy to get along with. He doesn't see that you're disappearing. At 28, at work, your boss overloads you with yet another impossible project. You feel angry, exhausted, wanting to scream, "I can't take it anymore." But what comes out of your mouth is, "No problem, I can handle it." And everyone thinks you're amazing, dedicated, hardworking. Nobody notices that you'll cry in the car later, alone, without really understanding why you're crying. At 34, you're in therapy for the first time, and the therapist asks, what are you feeling right now? And you realize with horror that you don't know. It's not that you don't want to talk. It's that you literally can't identify it. It's like being asked to describe a color you've never seen. You know you should know, but the signal simply doesn't come through. And then you understand that the 6-year-old child who heard "Stop it," it was nothing, didn't stop feeling. You just learned not to listen to what you felt. You disconnected. And now, decades later, you're paying the price for a survival skill that became a prison. But before understanding how you got here, you need to know something that will completely change how you see your story. What you experienced, this pattern, has a name, and it's not weakness. It's not an exaggeration, and it's definitely not your fault. What you experienced is called emotional neglect in childhood, and in psychology, specifically in the work of psychologist Jonas Webb, this is recognized as a form of trauma that leaves invisible but devastatingly real scars. This is what happens when your caregivers didn't abuse you, didn't hit you, didn't physically abandon you, but failed at one fundamental thing: validating your internal emotional experience. Emotional validation is the act of recognizing, accepting, and responding appropriately to someone's emotions. It's saying, I see what you're feeling. It makes sense for you to feel this way, and it's okay. Sounds simple, right? But when you grow up without it, when your emotions are consistently treated as exaggerated, inappropriate, inconvenient, or simply ignored, your brain learns something devastating. Your emotions are not reliable data about your reality. They are noise to be silenced. And here's what neuroscience shows. Young children aren't born knowing how to regulate emotions. They are completely dependent on the adults around them to mirror, name, and validate what they are feeling. When a child falls and the mother says, "Wow, that must have hurt. Come here and I'll help you," the child learns 3 fundamental things. First, that pain is real. Second, that it is safe to communicate it. Third, that there will be acceptance. But when the response is, "It was nothing, stop crying," the child learns the opposite. That pain should not be acknowledged. That communicating it is problematic. That acceptance will not come. The child's prefrontal cortex, responsible for regulating emotions, develops through this co-regulation with caregivers. Literally, your ability to calm yourself down as an adult depends on how many times you were calmed down as a child. And when that doesn't happen, when your emotions are repeatedly invalidated, your nervous system learns that emotions are dangerous, that expressing them results in rejection. So you develop what Pete Walker calls emotional freezing. You simply shut down access to your emotions as a survival strategy. And this works brilliantly as a child, because if expressing what you feel results in being ignored, ridiculed, or punished, then stopping expressing is adaptive. It's smart. It's the only thing you can do. You become what Alice Miller calls the well-adjusted child, one who intuits what adults want and molds themselves perfectly to it, abandoning their own needs in the process. On the outside, you are the model child, understanding, mature, independent, easy to care for. On the inside, you are a terrified child learning that to be loved, you need not to need. That to be accepted, you need not to feel. That to belong, you need to disappear emotionally. And this doesn't happen because your parents are monsters. Most of the time, they themselves grew up without validation. They are replicating the only model they know. But understanding this doesn't change the fact that you, as a child, internalized a devastating truth. You, as you really are, with your real emotions are too much. You are inadequate. You are a problem. So you create a false identity, a persona, the acceptable self. And this persona is constantly rewarded. You receive attention for being easy, for not creating problems, for being too mature for your age. And the more attention the persona receives, the more you bury who you really are. Because who you really are, vulnerable, needy, emotional, was never allowed to exist. And when you grow up with that, when that becomes your fundamental architecture of relating to the world, something interesting happens. You don't just become someone who hides emotions, you become someone who genuinely can't access them. You become emotionally illiterate in your own life. And this manifests in ways you would never connect to your childhood. In romantic relationships, you become the easiest person to love. You never ask for anything. You perfectly adjust to the other person's needs. You are understanding when they forget important things. You minimize when they hurt you. No, seriously, it's okay. And you attract repeatedly people who love that. People who don't want a partner. They want a fan. Emotionally unavailable people who feel comfortable with someone who never demands emotional reciprocity. And you stay because some crumb of attention still seems better than risking expressing a need and being rejected. You tolerate things that no one should tolerate, not because you're a masochist, but because you've been trained decade after decade that your emotions are exaggerated. So when something hurts you, you immediately question whether you should be hurt. Am I being too sensitive? Am I exaggerating again? And you normalize the unacceptable because you don't trust your own emotional thermometer. It was never calibrated in childhood. When the relationship ends, you can't identify what went wrong because you did everything right? You were understanding. You didn't complain. You adapted perfectly. How could it not have been enough? And you don't realize that the problem wasn't you doing everything wrong. It was you disappearing completely. And eventually, even emotionally limited people realize they're in a relationship with a ghost. But you don't process that. You're already busy being understanding with the person who left you. She had her reasons. I understand his side. You validate the emotional experience of the person who hurt you better than you ever validated your own. And alone, in the silence of the early morning, that emptiness you've carried since childhood screams so loudly that you think you're going to go crazy. But in the morning, when someone asks how you are, you say, "I'm fine." Automatic. At work, you're every toxic boss's dream. You accept yet another project. Even when you're already overloaded, you don't negotiate salary because asking for money seems desperate, needy, as if you have too much. You arrive early, leave late, skip lunch, take work home, and when someone comments, "Wow, you work too much," you laugh and say, "I like it." But you don't like it, you're exhausted. You just can't stop because stopping means having to feel. And feeling is what you've spent 30 years learning to avoid. You don't celebrate victories. When you achieve something incredible, something that should fill you with pride, you minimize it. Oh, it was luck. It wasn't that difficult. Because celebrating means drawing attention. It means occupying emotional space. And you learned that taking up space is dangerous. So you make yourself small, always. And eventually, your body takes its toll. You develop physical symptoms, migraines, digestive problems, chronic insomnia. Because unexpressed emotions don't disappear days so much easy. They turn into pain in the body because they don't find a way out through the mouth. And you go from doctor to doctor trying to find a physical cause, because accepting that the problem is emotional would be validating that your emotions matter. And you can't do that. Not yet. In friendships, you are always available. You are everyone's unpaid therapist. People seek you out when they are down because you listen, you validate, you support. But when you are down, you don't tell them. You say you're fine. And if they insist, you tell a minimized, edited, palatable version. Because telling the whole truth, the hell pain seems like a burden you don't have the right to put on anyone. So your friendships are asymmetrical. You give everything, you receive crumbs. And you think that's the most you can expect. You celebrate everyone's birthday. You remember important dates. You text asking how that important meeting went. But when it's your birthday and nobody remembers, you don't get hurt. Or rather, you do, but you immediately dismiss what you feel. Oh, birthdays are silly anyway. Everyone's busy. It's normal. You become the defense attorney for everyone who disappointed you, except yourself. And the worst part, with yourself, when you're alone, when there's no one to impress with your everything's fine persona, the silence is deafening. You can't be alone with yourself. You need constant distraction. Cell phone screen, Netflix, anything. Because when it gets too quiet, you feel that emptiness you've carried since you were 6 years old. That validation-shaped hole that was never filled. You don't have real hobbies. You have things you do to pass the time. Because genuine pleasure, that thing that makes you lose track of time because you're so absorbed, requires connection with what you feel, and you don't have that. You're disconnected. Your internal dialogue is brutal. You talk to yourself in a way you would never talk to another person. You're pathetic. Nobody cares about you anyway. You're weak, and you think that's motivation, discipline. But in reality, it's the voice of your caregivers echoing decades later. It's you doing to yourself what was done to you. Invalidating, minimizing, silencing. And here are the most painful contradictions you live with every day. You are always available to others, but you completely disappear when you need someone. You are incredibly empathetic to other people's pain, but you treat your own pain as trivial. You can perfectly validate what others feel, but you question every emotion of your own. You would give anything for someone you love, but you can't ask for a little help. You're extremely generous with everyone, but you feel guilty about spending money on yourself. You clearly see when someone is being mistreated in a relationship, but you normalize it when it happens to you. You encourage your friends to have boundaries, but you can't say no. You believe everyone deserves care and compassion except you. You know, theoretically, that emotions are valid, but yours specifically aren't. And the most painful of all, you've managed to survive hiding your emotions, but you're dying inside because they've never been seen. You look around and see people who seem so comfortable asking for what they need. People who say, "I'm not feeling well today," without seeming like they're committing a crime. People who cry in front of others and don't die of embarrassment. And you wonder what's wrong with you. Why can't you do it? Why does it seem so impossible? But there's nothing wrong with you. You're operating exactly as you were programmed, like any child would operate. After years of learning that expressing needs results in rejection, you've become excellent at what you were trained to be, emotionally invisible. The problem isn't that you're doing it wrong. The problem is that you can no longer stop doing it. And there's a secret fantasy you carry, a fantasy that you barely admit to yourself, because it seems childish, impossible, pathetic. You fantasize that one day someone will simply know. Someone will look at you and see through the persona, will realize that you're not okay without you needing to say it, will insist when you say, "I'm fine," will emotionally hold you in their arms and say, "I know you're lying. I see you, and you don't need to pretend with me." You fantasize that someone will validate everything you've never been able to say, will recognize the effort you've made just to survive all these years, will understand that beneath the automatic "I'm fine" there's a person who is drowning. And in this fantasy, you finally allow yourself to crumble. Finally, allow yourself to be seen in all your fragility. And you are not rejected. You are embraced. This fantasy is so strong, so vivid, that sometimes you choose partners, friends, even therapists, secretly hoping that they will be that person who will save you from yourself. And when they inevitably aren't, when they also can't see through your carefully constructed walls, you feel confirmed. See, I knew it. Nobody really cares. But it's not that they don't care. It's that you're asking them to do something that only you can do for yourself. Because here's the painful truth, the truth you've spent your whole life avoiding. Nobody is coming to save you. A magical person isn't going to appear and validate everything your parents didn't. A partner isn't going to come along and heal 30 years of emotional neglect just by being present. There's not going to be a cinematic moment where someone finally says the perfect words and everything is fixed. You are the someone. You are the person who needs to start validating your own emotions. And I know, that sounds impossible. How are you going to validate something you've been trained your whole life to dismiss? How are you going to trust emotions that you've always been told are exaggerated? But before we talk about how, you need to deconstruct the lies that keep you trapped. And the first lie, the most insidious, is this: it wasn't that bad. You minimize your childhood because your parents didn't hit you, didn't physically abandon you, weren't obvious monsters, so you think you have no right to complain. But emotional neglect is trauma. It's invisible, but it's real. And the absence of something you needed emotional validation hurts as much as the presence of abuse. Hunger hurts as much as beatings. It's just more silent. The second lie: I'm just strong like this. No, you're not naturally strong. You were forced to develop premature strength to survive in an environment that didn't emotionally support you. True strength isn't about not needing anything. True strength is knowing what you need and having the courage to ask for it. What you have isn't strength. It's armor so heavy you've forgotten you're wearing it. The third lie: I don't want to bother anyone. That's not a value of yours. It's a survival mechanism. You learned that your needs bother people, so you developed a deep horror of being a burden. But human needs aren't a nuisance. They single quotes human. Everyone has them. You were just punished for having yours. And now you call that internalized punishment consideration. The fourth lie: it's okay. It's not, and you know it. Because if it were okay, you wouldn't feel that emptiness. You wouldn't have that persistent feeling of living someone else's life. You wouldn't feel so alone, even when surrounded by people. It's not okay. And you deserve, finally, after decades, to admit that. Now, what won't heal you? Because you've probably already tried some of these things and been confused when they didn't work. Toxic positivity doesn't heal. Repeating affirmations about loving yourself while you still deeply believe your emotions are problematic is like putting a band-aid on an open fracture. Just get over it doesn't work. You can't get over something that's happening in the present. And yes, it is happening in the present. Every time you invalidate your own emotions, you're re-traumatizing that 6-year-old child. Prematurely forgiving your parents doesn't heal. Rationally understanding why they did what they did doesn't erase the impact on you. You can understand and still be hurt. The two coexist. And trying to jump straight to forgiveness without processing the pain is just another way of invalidating your emotions. So what really heals? Bessel van der Kolk, one of the world's leading trauma experts, says something fundamental. The body keeps score. You can't think your way out of a trauma that has been encoded in your nervous system. You need to feel. And feeling is exactly what you've been trained not to do. So healing, really healing, is learning to do the opposite of everything you've been taught. First, witness. Don't fix. Don't change. Don't rush. Just witness what you truly feel. And that starts with stopping asking yourself, should I be feeling this? And simply acknowledging I am feeling this. Period. No judgment. When you feel anger, you don't need to justify it. When you feel sadness, you don't need to rationalize it. You just need to acknowledge it as real. Second, feel without suppressing. Emotions have a natural cycle. They come, reach a peak, and pass. Naturally. But only if you let them exist. When you try to suppress them, freeze them, intellectualize them, they get stuck. They don't complete the cycle. And then they haunt you for years. Healing is learning to surf the emotional wave instead of building a dam. It's letting the tears come. It's feeling the anger in your body. It's allowing sadness to completely wash over you. Third, validate without minimizing. This means talking to yourself in a radically different way. When you catch yourself thinking this is nonsense, stop. Reframe. This is important to me, and it's okay. When you catch yourself saying, it wasn't that bad, stop. Reframe. It was bad enough to affect me, and that's valid. You need to become the validating adult you never had. And it's strange at first. It feels fake, but you persevere because you are literally reprogramming decades of conditioning. Fourth, grieve what you lost. You lost a childhood where your emotions were safe. You lost years, living as you truly are. You lost relationships because you couldn't be fully present. And it hurts. It needs to hurt. Because grief is the price we pay for having loved something we lost. And you need to grieve the childhood you deserved to have and didn't. Not to get stuck in the past, but to honor the impact of what happened. Fifth, healthy anger. You probably think anger is bad, destructive, something to be avoided. But healthy anger is what tells you that your boundaries have been violated, that you were treated in a way you didn't deserve. And you have a right to that anger, not to hurt anyone, but to validate that what happened wasn't right. Gabor Mate says something powerful. We cannot heal until we can feel, and feeling includes anger. And finally, reparation. You need to learn to be for yourself what your parents couldn't be. You need to ask yourself, what do I need now? And really listen to the answer. You need to give yourself permission to have boundaries, needs, wants. You need to treat your emotions as important data about your experience, not as inconveniences to be managed. You need to practice being seen by yourself before expecting to be seen by others. And all of this begins with a question that will terrify you because it goes against everything you've been taught. A question that will seem selfish, narcissistic, wrong. But this question is the way back to yourself. The question is, what do I need that no one has ever given me permission to need? Not what you think you should need, not what seems reasonable to need, what you truly, viscerally, desperately need. And when the answer comes, you'll want to dismiss it immediately, because it will seem too much. It will seem childish. It will seem impossible. But that answer, that need you've buried for decades, is the map back to who you truly are. Maybe the answer is, I need someone to ask how I am and genuinely want to know. Maybe it's, I need to cry without having to explain why. Maybe it's, I need to say no without feeling like I'm killing someone. Maybe it's simply, I need to stop pretending I'm okay when I'm not. And then you do something radical. You practice giving it to yourself. Before expecting others to, you ask yourself how you are, really, and you listen. You give yourself permission to cry alone. You practice saying no in small situations. You stop for a second when someone asks how you are, and you check internally before automatically responding. The signs of healing aren't dramatic. You won't wake up one day completely different, but you will start noticing little things. You realize that you're going to express a need, and instead of panicking afterward, you survive. The world doesn't end. You tell a friend you're not feeling well, and they don't abandon you. You cry in front of someone and don't feel that paralyzing shame. Or you do, but you survive anyway. You start to feel angry when someone crosses your boundaries, and instead of immediately invalidating it, you think, interesting. My anger is telling me something. You ask someone for something small, and when they say yes, you don't feel eternally indebted. You accept that people may want to help you because you matter, not because you need to earn it through endless effort. You realize you're choosing to be alone. Instead of being in companies that makes you feel invisible, you end relationships that don't serve you without waiting for them to become absolutely unbearable first. You celebrate an achievement for a moment without immediately minimizing it. You spend money on yourself without guilt. You have a hobby that serves no purpose other than to make you happy. And the most subtle, most profound change, you begin to feel something akin to solidity, as if you were inhabiting your body instead of just operating it, as if you finally existed in 3 dimensions, not just the acceptable persona you present to the world, but the complete, complex, emotional person you always were but were never allowed to be. Here's what no one told you. Your need for emotional validation was never the problem. The problem was not having a choice. You didn't choose to hide your emotions because you thought it was a good idea. You were forced to do so to maintain the only bond you had with the people who were supposed to protect you. You did what any child would do. You adapted to survive. And it worked. You survived. But now you are no longer that 6-year-old child who had no option. You are an adult who can finally make different choices. You can start today to validate an emotion you always dismissed. You can say no once and see that you survive. You can admit, I'm not okay, and discover that the world doesn't fall apart. You can ask for help and learn that it doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. It will feel wrong. It will trigger all the survival alarms you've developed. Your body will scream danger. When you express a need, because for decades expressing a need meant rejection, but you can do it even if you're scared, even if you're uncomfortable, even if you think you're going to die. Because on the other side of that fear is something you've never had. The freedom to be who you really are. You've spent your whole life being what others needed. Being understanding when they wanted to vent, being strong when they needed stability, being small when your presence bothered them, being invisible when your emotions were inconvenient. And now, perhaps for the first time, you can choose something different. You can choose to take up space. You can choose that your emotions matter as much as anyone else's. You can choose that your needs are legitimate, even if no one has ever validated them. You can choose to be seen completely, vulnerability and all. And you can choose this knowing that some people will walk away because they liked your persona, not you. And that's okay, because the right people, the ones who are truly worthwhile, will stay. And they will see you. And they will love you not despite your emotional humanity, but because of it. You were never allowed to need. You were never allowed to feel. You were never allowed to be real. But now, at this very moment, you can give yourself that permission. Not because someone finally validated you, but because you can begin to validate yourself. And that radical choice to finally honor your own emotions after decades of silencing them is the beginning of something new. It's the beginning of you finally coming home to yourself.